Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for Junia Doan's The Spark. I'm Junia Doan, and my guest today is novelist, creative writing teacher, and editor Blair Hurley. Blair's debut novel, The Devoted, was published in August of 2018, and also in 2018, she received the Pushcart Prize. Welcome, Blair. So glad you're here, truly.
Thank you.
So writing is a sort of episodic experience. What convinced you could make a career of it and have an income flow from it to support your being?
Well, I would say that's always in question when you decide to embark on a career in the arts and in writing. I'm grateful to my family for always being very supportive and never really questioning my passion and my desire to write. So I just sort of put that question aside for a long time while I was working on becoming a better writer. Doing my apprenticeship, I would say, just trying to be a good student of writing and trying to make my writing better and better. And eventually I finished a draft of a novel, and I was getting encouraging feedback from my teachers, so I always believed, I think, that I could make it work. There were definitely plenty of rejections along the way, but I still had this very stubborn belief that I was a writer, and maybe that's what helped me keep going. I saw it as part of my identity. It wasn't really a career choice for me. It was always part of who I was.
What makes for a good writer when you said you got better and better?
A lot of things. I would say learning your fundamentals of craft. So how to shape a story, what makes a character feel real and makes a reader want to invest in a character. Now that I'm teaching creative writing as well, I think I've had to articulate more about what actually goes into a good story. And it tends to break down, I think, in these three large categories of language, plot structure, and character. So when I'm feeling a little lost in my own writing, I try to go back to those fundamentals of telling a suspenseful story that makes you want to turn the page, of developing a character who feels human and complex, and writing clearly and as beautifully as possible. Though I would say the more that I wrote, I discovered that writing in a pretty way actually wasn't the goal. It was more about trying to convey what you wanted to write and what you wanted to say as clearly and using as few words as possible.
So is it that I often read writers say, well, you have to let the characters lead. Is that true for you, and what actually does it mean?
Yes, I think for me it means that developing a character, it feels like a process of discovery more than creation. So when I'm developing my characters, it often means that I have to be quiet for a little while and listen to who they seem to be, what their childhoods were like, and what wounds they still have. And I have to ask myself questions about them. So it doesn't really feel like I'm creating this person. It feels like an act of listening, actually, and trying to understand what this person is telling me. I do think I'm creating the character, but it always works out better when I think of it as listening and discovering, I think.
It's a getting to know you.
It is,
yes. And so what questions have you found most effective in that getting to know you aspect of developing or identifying the character?
I would say I first ask, what do you want? I think knowing a character's desire is what is going to help me understand the character more and more. It's going to help me charge the story as well. Once I figure out what a character wants, I know that that's going to be at the center of the story. So when I was developing my central character in my novel, The Devoted, I had a lot of drafts where my character was just kind of wandering around, I would say, in a state of malaise and unhappiness. I didn't really know why she was unhappy, and I didn't know why she was making the choices she was making. So I also had to ask myself, why are you doing the things you are doing? And until I understood the answer to that question, I don't think I understood her at all. So yeah, I would say I ask, what do you want? And why do you keep making these mistakes in your life? Why are you making those bad choices?
I read The Devoted, which I really enjoyed, but it's like it's a search for meaning. You know, who was she? Who was the family? What were all these men doing? You know, then it involves her Buddhist mentor, which I thought was such an abuse of power. And I wondered how you saw the role of power in relationships. Does it change day-to-day experience, what we tell ourselves in our heads?
Yes, certainly. I think one of the central themes of the story is about power and how it can be abused. So in this relationship that Nicole, a Zen student, has with her Zen master, I agree. I think it's an abusive relationship, one in which she feels powerfully manipulated, in a way because in this relationship, the master holds spiritual superiority over her. And when someone holds the keys to heaven or to a spiritual enlightenment, that's a tremendous amount of power to hold over someone. So I think their relationship is always going to be fundamentally unequal because of that. And any desire that she feels or any meeting that they have, it's going to be based on that imbalance of power. So when I was writing that relationship, I think I wanted to honestly try to depict the real experiences that women in particular have had in these spiritual spaces where it's often men who are in the position of power that hold the teachings and the expertise, and they can say whatever they want in order to get what they want. And women who are genuinely looking for a spiritual experience, there's someone else blocking the door, I would say. So Nicole, the character, I think of her as a seeker, someone who desperately wants a spiritual sense of meaning in her life. But there are always people in the way. There are people that she has to obey or to please in order to access that spiritual experience. A part of the process that she goes through in the story is learning that she doesn't need that gatekeeper in a way, and that she has to find a way to go seeking on her own and discover her own power.
But your next book, as we were talking earlier, is the exploration of religion on the extreme, or anyway intense, that may tip over into cult.
Yes.
So another way of exploring the same issue, perhaps?
Certainly. I think writers probably get a few themes in their whole careers that they're haunted by and that they write over and over again in different forms. And I think I'll always be fascinated with religion and belief in particular. So I am curious about why people believe, what leads them to belief, how religious beliefs can kind of feed you or feed a certain aspect of your life. It can fill a need that's very powerful and profound for people. So I've been trying to research that and understand it. I would say I'm coming at it from the position of an outsider because I'm someone who has always been fairly skeptical myself and not a devout believer or official practitioner of any religion. But I'm very curious and wanting to be respectfully curious about other people's experiences with belief. So in my new novel that I'm working on now, I'm exploring definitely the dark side of that, how belief can be so all-consuming that it can lead people to be irrational and it can lead them into dangerous situations. So yeah, I'm just wanting to explore fundamentalist belief. There seems to be something particularly American about this fixation as well. In my research of kind of cult-like organizations, certainly there have been cults all over the world, but there are quite a few in America. There seems to be something about American culture that maybe a fringe aspect of American culture that attracts cult-like organizations or charismatic leaders who can attract followers, I would say.
Do you think they don't have enough entertainment in their life?
It
I was
could
just
be-
coming at it from a totally different point of view.
Yes, I would say it is about that show-stopping factor. So cults always have a leader. There's always someone who's very charismatic, who knows how to put on a good show. And Americans like a good show, I would say. There can be something very magnetic and attractive about someone who can tell them a story that they haven't heard before, or that feels right to them, that feels like it's relevant to their lives. So yeah, just about every cult I've researched has some kind of element of being a charismatic leader who can tell a good story, I would say.
Yes, I think sometimes I watch people go to these mass music events, and I've actually been to one. And what I noticed is, forget the singer, it's the energy buildup in the audience.
Yes, yes.
You know, that takes you to sort of a blissful state. And I was just noticing that when I went through it myself. So you don't write to answer questions or concerns for your own edification, as it were.
No, I think I write to ask questions, I would say. I definitely am drawn to the kinds of stories that raise a question that haunts me in some way, or that deeply unsettles me. By the end of a story, I hope to have learned more about it and to gain some understanding, but I'm very okay with questions being left unanswered, I would say.
Well, it's more like life. There's a
Yes.
mystery to life that's incomplete.
Yes,
You know, or
yes.
you get a fraction of it, or something like that. Do you think, I know you were close to your mom, and does that inform any part of your interest in women or their relationships to life, their search for autonomy?
I think so. My relationship with my mother was very close, and she was also a writer herself. So she had some stories published in small magazines, and she always wanted to write. And so we shared this powerful bond where she was my first editor. I would rush to her with my latest little story, and she was a tough critic as well. She would mark it up and tell me all about my grammar errors and everything. And so I had this very close bond with my mother that was through the lens of writing and storytelling. So in just about every story I've written, I think there is a strong mother character who plays a role. I certainly fictionalize it. So in The Devoted, the mother character is very different from my mother. And she has a powerful negative force, I would say,
Yes.
in my character's life. I think the thing that does come through is the strong bond of love, in the way that love can sometimes almost feel like ownership, or it can feel smothering, or like a bond that you can't break. And particularly when you're young and going through your teenage years, that can feel oppressive almost, that when you realize that someone loves you so much. Sometimes you just want to be free of all the responsibilities and burdens of love. So I tried to write about love in the novel, mother love and parental love, as a kind of bond that, for better or worse, you're trapped by it. It's part of you. You can't free yourself from it. So I think that might be one way that I write about mothers, the way that mothers' love can be so strong and so sustaining that sometimes you have to push against it. You want to wrestle with it and try to find your own way in the world.
You know, going back to the cult and religion, some people need to be directed. And some of us, like myself, do not like to be told what to do.
Yes.
And so I wonder what personality plays into one's susceptibility to this, or confusion, or inner pain.
I'm curious about that too, and I'm trying to figure that out as I'm writing the novel. I think there was something that my editor said to me when she first read a draft of The Devoted, and she said, some people are always seeking.
Yes, I do.
And I think that's true, that there are some people who are seekers in life. They're looking for some deeper meaning to life or a kind of hidden answer to the mystery of life, and they're always going to be drawn to people who have what sounds like compelling answers to that. So if there is a personality type that's drawn to religious belief or cult-like beliefs, I would say it's someone who feels like they're a seeker there, or that they have a curiosity about the secret underpinnings of the universe.
I'd like to speak up for seekers. I'm one of them, but what I had to learn was to live with not uncertainty but contradictions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the things were not murky, but not unknowable, but differently knowable.
Yes.
And that you have to live. I have to live with knowing that. And I also feel that one of the things my girlfriend taught me, she said, you get the same test through mistakes until you learn the lesson. And once you learn the lesson, you stop having that experience. You may have another lesson to learn. And so when anything goes wrong in my life, and I tried to raise my daughter that way, I say, what's the lesson? She was a mom.
Right.
But I do think that's a way to say, what am I doing in a repetitive way, you know, that isn't fun,
yes.
right? At the end point isn't fun.
Yes.
And that takes courage, because I, in my earlier life, was not so wise.
And I think it's a lifelong journey of making mistakes and learning, hopefully learning right up until the last moment, I would say. But I agree. I think having a kind of peace with the contradictions that are part of life,
Yes.
or the ways that all people will never be the same, or that we can't fully understand the ways that people behave in frustrating ways. We can't ever perfect ourselves, I think. And that is another aspect of religious belief that I find interesting. There's often kind of a desire to purify oneself or to become perfect. And I think when I'm writing about religious characters, that's often part of their desire. They wish that they could become pure in some way and understand everything and become perfect. But I always think it's kind of a fool's endeavor, in a way, to try. I think life is necessarily impure and imperfect, and that's part of the beauty of life.
With the big dark side.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So to feel that we can fully remove the dark or defeat the evils of the world, I think it's too simple. I would say life's always more complicated than that.
And more interesting.
Yes, yes, I agree.
You have to stay interested in perception and layers. I call them layers, but different ways of looking at things. You know, even in your characters, it's whose character, you know, and whose version of the world are we living here?
Yes, and when I'm creating fictional characters, I think my goal is always for nuance, to understand that people are always more complex than you first think that they are. Whether it's discovering something else in their past or realizing that they've lived a life that you never knew, they know things that I don't know. Whatever it is, people are always more complicated than they first seem.
And so, but what's the best way to, or best ways to understand them in the moment?
I would say, just as you were talking about curiosity, I think that's one of the most important qualities we can have in life, to be respectful but curious about other people's experiences. I sometimes talk in my classes to my students about the importance of imaginative empathy. So trying to imagine ourselves honestly into someone else's experience, and to just the good old-fashioned advice to walk in someone else's shoes, I would say, is probably the most important skill we need as writers.
What did you call it again? Empathetic?
Imaginative empathy, yes.
That's beautiful.
Oh.
That's really beautiful.
Well, I think you have to be able to imagine, but you also need that sort of that compassion, that empathy as well, to try to give someone the benefit of the doubt and to try to imagine what they feel, really.
And what their value system is.
And what their values are, yes. Mm-hmm.
I've tried that once or twice. I was very discouraged because I found, true or not, I don't know, they wanted a small life. They didn't want to know.
Ah, yes. It can be frustrating sometimes sometimes if we're very generous with people and then they can disappoint us when we look deeper and there really is nothing there, or there is maybe anger and hostility and contempt there. All I can do personally is I try to never feel contempt for my characters and the people I'm encountering, even if they hold views that are very different from my own. I think my job as a writer is to try to empathize, or at least to understand where they might be coming from and why they believe that their beliefs are valid.
So what would you say about the master in this case? How could you treat that with empathy?
I would say I think he genuinely believes that he has a duty to his students, to teach them, to enlighten them about the hard truths of reality and existence. I think he was raised in a tradition that says the only way to wake up is to be slapped in the face, to have a kind of brutality. That's the only way to fully be awakened out of our delusions. And there is a traditional way of teaching Buddhism that has that element to it, that you have to have a brutal awakening, or that you have to be shocked out of your delusions. I think he's sort of an old school teacher in that way, and he believes that he's doing the right thing. At some point, though, his own personal desires have gotten in the way of any kind of noble teaching impulse. And it's someone who's lost control, I would say, of himself and his own desires.
But when he involves her sexually, then he never felt bad about it, as far as I could find out. It was those need of whatever.
I think he's thinking about his own needs in that moment. He thinks that he can save her, I would say, and he feels that this is his sacred duty. He feels that he can save her, and that in a way he is entitled to her body because of this role that he plays as her superior and as her teacher. I agree. I don't think he's ever repentant about what he is doing and how he's harming her. I don't think he thinks he's harming her. I think he thinks this is correct and appropriate, as a master and student might share an intimate space. And it will take some empathy on his part to realize how she's being harmed by that relationship. I can't do it for him, I would say. I can only have my own opinions about how he's misguided about it.
So in the new book, is it, I hope you continue this interest in power relationships and how they change or misunderstood or run by the value system, because throughout our lives we are going to be supplicants in some areas.
Yes.
Or learners or beginners or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be careful when we're on the other side of that.
Yes. I think often about that. I think that's probably another one of those themes that I'm always going to be writing about, these power dynamics that interest me, and how between parents and children, between students and teachers, there are always going to be power imbalances in our lives. So I don't think that's something that can be avoided. It is about finding a way to respect each other in those relationships, I would say.
What I use myself, do you know Martin Buber's work?
No, I don't.
He was a Jewish philosopher around the 40s, 50s, maybe earlier. And he, bottom line, says there are really only two relationships in life. I, it, which is transactional, or I, thou, in which you see the other person and you respect the other person and you communicate as equals, reaching for the... And I think you're always teeter-tottering.
Yes. I think it can, within the space of one relationship, it can sometimes be one way and sometimes we see each other as equals, and it can shift and change, I would say.
Yes.
So in the book I'm writing now, it is about a girl growing up in this cult-like environment with her father as the leader. And as she grows older, I'm hoping she starts to assert herself and show that sort of demanding that he see her as an equal. At first, though, she's more like a weapon that he wields, and he really sees her as just kind of an object that he can use. But as she grows, their relationship changes. She has the presence of mind to start challenging him.
Where does she get that from? Because it's not in the culture that she's living in.
Yes, and that's always a question. And as a writer, I had to think about this as well. I think she needs to have some kind of outside influence, something that allows her to envision a different life. So I'm working on it. But right now, I would say there are other outsiders that she encounters, and she has friendships. In The Devoted as well, I felt very strongly that my main character needed friends. She needed someone who she could reach out to, who could show her that the very twisted relationship she's living in right now is not the whole universe. There's an outside world. So in an early draft, I even wrote on top of, in big letters, she needs a friend. And then I gave her a friend. So she does have a friend.
Can that be done through books or movies?
Yes, I think so. And I would say, not that I was in an environment like this, but growing up for me, books were my thread to another world.
Yeah.
And they allowed me to expand my mind. So both of my characters that I'm writing about are big readers as well. I think it's important, and it is possibly a lifeline.
Thank you, Blair. So we've learned quite a bit today that it's important to go forward with. One is to ask questions in your own life, and secondly is to seek to understand other people's point of view, but also be mindful throughout your life. Are you abusing people or being abused? What kind of relationships do you want in your life? And I happen to read books, so I learn a lot through that kind of thing. But the importance of finding alternates in your life what do I want to say, and how you are in the world. She was very lucky to have a mother who cared enough, right, to tutor her and train her. They shared that. That's very rare, and truly a gift. And I think that confidence the mother had in her really animated her to continue in this way. And as long as you ask questions in life, you have a more interesting life. So please go out and do something kind for someone you know and someone you don't know, and do it every day till I see you next time. Thank you, and thank you, Blair.
Thank you.
So interesting.
To contact Junia, send her an email at juniadonsthespark@gmail.com. For more information, program schedules, and news about future guests, go to www.juniadonsthespark.com. Thank you for joining us. See you next time on Junia Doan's The Spark.
Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.